Okay, thank you. All right. So I'm going to focus on the system dynamics side of things rather than the public money. I'm happy to discuss that in a seminar, of course. And from my point of view, and that's the title I've got there, Kaoru is probably the primary exponent of system dynamics in economics. There are others, but it's a handful of people. I know most of them personally, people like Mike Ragzewski, David Wheat, and so on. But in terms of producing a gigantic model of the economy in system dynamics, I think Kaoru stands alone. He has one competitor now. I'll talk about that at the end, maybe during the seminar as well. But certainly Kaoru has done more than anybody else to build a system dynamics model of a capitalist economy. And when you see where system dynamics came from, that was the actual intention of the original designer, J. Forrester. He had a remarkable seminar, which has been published recent, about 10 years ago, I think, MIT seminar on November the 5th, 1956. We're talking, many decades ago. And the reason he gave the seminar was he'd read a number of economics books, textbooks and articles and so on about how one models the economy. And he was absolutely horrified. There's no other way to describe his reaction. He said one of the striking shortcomings is they do not have all the feedback effects that we know exist in a genuine capitalist economy. They neglect the flow of goods and money, which is what capitalism is actually about. And they are formulated in terms of simultaneous algebraic equations, which he said is peculiarly unsuited to analysing the actual technique. They've moved on from there to some extent to difference equations, but it's still a very primitive approach to modelling a capitalist economy. Now, as well as being correct as a critic about the state of economics, Forrester was unfortunately wrong about what was going to happen in the future, because writing back in the 50s, he thought that by the 60s, we'd have sensible models an order of magnitude better than current models, and expected to have a national model in the 1960s. Now, that is not what happened. There are two reasons for it. One is that rather than having their invention of system dynamics welcomed by economists, they were hostile. And I actually discussed this with Jorgen Randers when I first met him at Sydney University when he was giving a seminar there. And he told me that he and the other authors expected economists would say, thank you from saving us to have to make this crazy assumption of equilibrium. In fact, they said, keep your hands off our assumption of equilibrium. They rejected the approach. So that was the hostility of the economics profession. But on the other side, the national model that Forrester thought would be a fairly easy thing to build never came about. And Kaoru said, being a latecomer to the research, he visited Forrester, and I imagine, Kaoru, you got a bit of a cold shoulder. You can tell us a bit more in detail about that. But what he said was it wasn't available. You couldn't see it. So that left Kaoru to the situation, well, I want to see this model built. I need to go about it. But it was very fruitful for him because he realized that one of the reasons that Forrester had not achieved his ambition was he hadn't built an accounting structure into his model. And accounting is absolutely fundamental to understanding how a capitalist economy functions. So what Kaoru did, therefore, was to design his own accounting framework inside the system dynamics tools, VenSim in this case, because it wasn't just enough to have system dynamics. You had to have a way of building the models that obeyed the rules of double entry bookkeeping and accounting, and that wasn't inherently built into system dynamics models. So you have to model the accounting, and this I think is where he and I are completely in agreement. We took different approaches to doing it. So he tells us that he tried to find somebody else who'd done it, found it wasn't there. So he realized he had to develop his own framework for accounting within system dynamics. And I regard that as an absolutely crucial advance. It's one of the reasons why this prize is so justified, because I think the failure of the original models to actually do what they thought would be possible in a few years, having not been done for decades, it's because they didn't develop an accounting framework. Now, this is Kaoru's accounting framework in VenSim. And I'm going to leave it there for a second. It is comprehensive and accurate, but extremely hard to understand because, again, I don't believe the flowchart technology works as a way of showing double entry bookkeeping. But what he did by having this as a foundation, he could then use that in his overall macroeconomic model to build what Forrester failed to build. And again, that's a great achievement. Now, the trouble is, how do you interpret it? Because these are all the slides from Kaoru's most comprehensive model, not of the monetary system here, but of capitalism in general. So your population model, and you have GDP determination with inventory management, interest rates, prices and wage rates, transactions of producers, of consumers, and you'll notice the accounting structure is turning up in all of these, government transactions, banks, central bank, foreign exchange, balance of payments, and then the controls to see the results. So it's hugely complicated. And I think here, the system dynamics tools are letting Kaoru down because his ambition is to make this not just something you can model, but something you can explain. And of course, we all know the story of the spaghetti diagram. This, of course, was wrongly attributed to PowerPoint. I think this is probably a stellar model of the Afghan civil war, well, not civil war, invasion by the Americans and the fighting back by various national bodies against them. So the reaction of the general when he first saw this, he said, if I can understand this diagram, I can win the war, which is actually true, because it was actually a system dynamics about how one wins a conflict. It isn't just a case of bombing the hell out of the enemy. It's building an alternative system. So it's the right thing we have to do. But the trouble is, and this is a general thing with the system dynamics models, as just the innate nature of the software, the author can understand the diagram, but nobody else can. And so we have a real problem in communicating what we're trying to do. And that's why I invented a software package that I first of all called Minsky. That's one of the things I was given the award for myself. I now call it Ravel. Happy to explain why I went for the name change. So I regard accounting as absolutely critical. But rather than trying to build accounting inside the flowchart dynamics framework, I thought I better actually create another program in which double entry bookkeeping is innate. And to give an idea of the comparison, this is one of the models in Kaoru's work of the of the government transactions. This is the same thing in Ravel. Now, of course, it'd take a while to explain mine versus Kaoru's, but the basic point is you can actually read line by line in a double entry bookkeeping table, and so long as the lines themselves make sense, you end up accepting, yes, the model is valid as an explanation of the structure. You can't do that with a system dynamics framework. There's far too much to take in. It's not possible to intuitively work out what in fact is the overall outcome. So I think the thing which Kaoru did with bringing accounting into system dynamics is absolutely critical, but we need to go beyond that and develop tools that a new generation of system dynamics people can take over from myself and Kaoru and the handful of people who I know who actually build system dynamics models. I'm guessing, but I would say there's less than 20 people who do that globally. We need thousands instead. Now, forget about the incumbents. The neoclassicals are too far gone to even be bothered about. They simply can't understand what we're talking about either in terms of money or system dynamics. We need a new generation that can be excited by the work that Kaoru and I have established and mean that rather than there's 20 people, we need 20,000 people doing this work in the future. And I think the current interfaces of both Vensim and Stellar, I think, and all the existing models, that's again what I've developed my own. They're too opaque, and they're not exciting. They're not. They don't have they haven't moved on for 50 years in terms of how they do graphics. And I think this is one of the main reasons why Kaoru's work hasn't got the recognition it deserved, because his major work, which was just published earlier this year, as you can see in February, is 1.3 millionth in book sales. We need it we need it in the first 1,000, not the first million. So we need something that is going to make system dynamics make that leap from being obscure and a minority of people doing it, and when one person leaves the scene, not necessarily replaced by others, we need new tools to get there. So I think this is a richly deserved award, both for pioneering system dynamics and economics and developing the accounting framework. And what we need now is a way that others can follow in Kaoru's footsteps. So thank you.